Hello! I hope this story will evoke emotions in you and make you think about the complexities of life trust and the power of forgiveness. Your feedback, suggestions, and subscriptions are always welcome. Sarah had no idea that her life would change forever that evening. It all started when she decided to clean up Harold's office, which had always been his personal territory. There, she found something that was the beginning of unraveling years of lies. On the bottom shelf of the closet was a box of trinkets that Sarah hadn't seen in years. Among the old receipts, letters, and notebooks, she came across Harold's old cell phone. She usually never looked through his things, but this time something stopped her. She turned on the phone. The screen glowed with the password, but suddenly it unlocked itself. Apparently, there was an old combination that Sarah remembered well. Among the messages was a folder with the name, Anna, and she opened it, and there were hundreds of messages, photos, and even videos. Sarah had always thought her marriage to Harold was perfect. They had been through everything together in hard times, raising children, financial difficulties. But here, in this phone, was proof that her husband had been leading a double life for years. "My darling, I can't wait to see you again. You always bring light to my life," Anna wrote. Sarah felt her chest go cold. Her hands shook as she looked through the photos. Harold was smiling, looking younger, and it was a smile Sarah hadn't seen in years. Despair quickly gave way to anger. Sarah threw her phone on the table and grabbed her head. She tried to understand how long this had been going on and how she could have missed it. Her thoughts were interrupted by Harold's footsteps. He came home earlier than usual. "What are you doing in my office?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were alarmed when he saw the phone in her hands. "You explain to me who this Anna is and why you've been lying to me for so many years." Sarah's voice was trembling with rage. Harold took a step back as if from a blow. "Sarah, it's not what you think." He tried to speak calmly, but his voice was breaking. "Not what I think it is." Her voice was getting louder and louder. Random messages from some woman you call beloved. It's just a mistake, it's not serious." Harold tried to explain, but his words only made Sarah more angry. Sarah could no longer hold back her tears. Her voice was torn between crying and screaming. 50 years, Harold! 50 years and you've ruined it! Why?" Harold looked down, not knowing what to say. His silence only added to the pain. I thought I knew you, that I could trust you. But now I see that it was all a lie." Sarah decided not to listen to his excuses. She picked up the phone and left the room, leaving Harold alone. A plan was already forming in her mind to find all the details, find out the truth, and figure out how to proceed. Sarah, a 70-year-old woman with a warm smile and soft voice, has devoted her entire life to her family. She grew up in a small town in Missouri where she met Harold, her husband, when she was young. Their love story began at a school dance, and a few years later they were married. Sarah has always been a pillar of strength for her family. She raised 2 children, Julia and Peter, providing them with the best of everything. Her life seemed perfect in a home filled with laughter, dinner at the table together, and confidential conversations with her husband. In recent years, however, something had changed. Sarah began to notice that Harold had become distant. His frequent absences from home were explained by meeting friends, but it left a bitter taste in her heart. Harold was always a man of his word. His kindness and patience made him an exemplary husband and father. When he was young, he worked 2 jobs to provide for his family. He never forgot birthdays, always brought Sarah flowers, and supported her in everything. But behind the outward perfection was a man who could not always express his true feelings. Harold was not inclined to talk openly about his problems, which often made Sarah guess what was going on in his soul. His last years were filled with strange changes. He began to avoid family gatherings, spend more time out of the house, and his phone was always on silent. Sarah noticed this, but did not want to spoil the atmosphere with conflicts. Julia, the eldest daughter, has always been like her mother. She is responsible, caring, and her life revolves around her own family. Julia often came to visit Sarah on weekends to help with the house or just to talk, and as she noticed that something was wrong with her father, but didn't know how to bring it up. Peter, the younger son, on the other hand, took after his father. He has always been ambitious and a bit aloof. After moving to another city, he rarely came home, although he always called on holidays. Peter believed that his parents had a perfect marriage, and so he never thought about possible problems. For Sarah and Harold, their marriage was built on respect, trust, and mutual support. They have always taught their children that family is the most important thing to cherish. But recent years have brought cracks in this perfect picture. Sarah felt that Harold was keeping her at a distance. She often recalled how in their youth they solved all problems together, shared dreams, and supported each other. Now that feeling was gone, and she didn't understand why. Sarah had a secret fear. She was afraid of being alone. Her friends often shared stories of infidelity or loss of trust in their marriages, but Sarah always thought that it would not affect her. Harold carried the burden of his decisions. His internal conflict between the desire to leave everything as it was and the need to keep secrets was eating him up inside. Sarah tries to put her thoughts together after the shocking discovery. She is struggling with mixed feelings, anger, disappointment, and at the same time trying to find a rational explanation for what happened. Sarah sat in the kitchen, looking out the window, her hands nervously clutching a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She couldn't fathom how Harold, her husband of 50 years, could have betrayed her like that. Why? This question kept repeating like an obsessive motive. She wanted to scream, to break something, but instead she remained sitting there, feeling empty. Thinking back on their years together, Sarah realized that there were times when Harold seemed distant, but she never gave it much thought. Maybe I did something wrong, Sarah thought, although she knew inside that it wasn't her fault. She remembered how she had always supportive of Harold, cooking him his favorite meals, waiting for him to come home from work, and helping him with his finances. Sarah tried to put together a timeline of events to understand when it all started. She recalled the frequent calls Harold would receive in the evening and how he would go off to talk in another room. At the time, it just seemed like work stuff. Sarah decided she had to talk to Harold to find out the truth. She prepared the words she would say, but each time the imaginary dialogue ended in a scream or silence. How can I talk to him calmly? How dare he do this to me? These thoughts flooded her mind again. She even imagined going up to him and just smashing a plate on the table. But that was not her nature. Sarah had always been reserved and believed that problems should be solved by talking. The not knowing who to share her thoughts with, Sarah decided to call her daughter Julia. She had always been close to her mother and could support her like no other. Mom, you sound like something's happened, Julia said when she heard Sarah's voice. Sarah sighed. She didn't know how to start the conversation. It was extremely difficult to tell her daughter about Harold's infidelity. Julia, I just want to talk about life. The daughter sensed that her mother was hiding something, but decided not to press. Sarah plunged into her memories. As she remembered Harold holding her hand in the hospital when she gave birth to Julia, how he fixed a broken chair in the living room smiling, and how they chose a vacation spot together. These memories brought tears to her eyes, but they also gave her strength. She realized that their marriage was not only a lie, but also a true love story, at least at some point. Deep down, Sarah began to wonder if she could forgive Harold, and if so, what difference would it make? She was raised in a spirit of forgiveness and patience. Her parents had always said that. Love requires sacrifice. But should she sacrifice her peace of mind to maintain the appearance of family happiness? Harold sat in the dark room, contemplating his decision. He knew he needed to tell the truth, but he couldn't find the words. His hands were shaking as he dialed Sarah's number. Sarah felt devastated. Her thoughts had been revolving around the betrayal all day. She decided to take care of the garden to distract herself for a while when the phone suddenly rang. Hello, she answered in a cold voice, seeing Harold's name on the screen. "Sarah, I need to talk to you." His voice was quiet and weak. "What else do you want to say after everything that happened?" She sounded hurt and irritated. "This is important," he said. "I can't explain everything over the phone. Please meet with me." A few hours later. Sarah stood in front of the door of the old house Harold had rented after their fight. She nervously clutched the keys in her hand, wondering what she would hear this time. When the door opened, Sarah saw him. Harold looked haggard, his face pale and his eyes blank. "What's wrong?" Her tone was dry, but there was a glimmer of concern in her eyes. "I'm sick," Harold admitted, looking down. Sarah froze. Her heart was beating faster, but she couldn't tell if it was out of shock or anger. What do you mean?" Her voice trembled. "I have cancer," Harold replied, sitting down in a chair. "The doctors say I don't have much time left." Sarah sat down across from him, trying to digest what she had heard. Her emotions were mixed sympathy, pain, anger, and even confusion. "Why didn't you tell me? Why am I only finding out now?" Sarah asked, trying to hold back her tears. "I was afraid," Harold answered. "I was afraid you wouldn't want to see me after what I did, but I can't hide it anymore. You decided to come to me only when you had nowhere else to go." Her voice grew sharper. Harold lowered his head. He couldn't deny what she was saying. Sarah felt her mind torn between two poles. On the one hand, she couldn't leave the man she had lived with for 50 years, even after the betrayal. On the other hand, her pride and pain did not allow her to simply forgive him. "What do you want from me, Harold?" she asked. "I want only one thing, your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I can't leave with this burden." His voice was weak but sincere. Sarah remembered their moments together, how they built a house together, how he carried her in his arms after the wedding, how they laughed while looking at old photos. These memories had always been her support, but now they seemed distant and unattainable. She looked at Harold and realized that she was looking at not just a traitor, but a person who was also suffering. I don't know if I can forgive you," Sarah said, "but I don't want you to be alone at this time." Harold looked at her with gratitude but said nothing. Sarah stood at the window, looking out at the garden she and Harold had tended together for many years. Every flower, every bush was a reminder of their life together, but now it all seemed broken, just like her heart. Harold sat on the couch, trying not to look at his wife. His hands nervously fumbled with an old handkerchief. "Sarah, I know I don't deserve your help," he began, his voice quiet, "but I can't do this alone anymore." "Ada," Sarah turned to him, her eyes glistening with tears. "Do you realize you're asking me to forget everything? To forget betrayal, the pain, everything you've done?" Her voice was sharp but weak. I'm not asking you to forget," Harold replied. "I'm just asking you not to leave me now." "How did you leave me then, Harold?" Sarah replied sharply. "After 50 years of marriage, you chose another woman. Then didn't you think of me when you cheated on me, and now you expect me to be there for you?" Harold lowered his head. He had no excuses that could change the situation. "I was a fool," he admitted, "and now I'm paying for my mistakes." Sarah could feel her mind and heart arguing with each other. Her rational part screamed that she had the right to refuse him, to leave him to his problems. But her heart was remembering all the moments of their life together, their children, their house they had built together. "Do you realize how hard this is for me now?" she asked. "Io opo do," Harold answered quietly. "And if you decide to say no, I will accept it." Suddenly Sarah realized that she was no longer angry. She felt something else, emptiness. All those years with Harold had been the foundation of her life, and now that it was falling apart, she was left alone with her thoughts. "What do you want from me, Harold?" Her voice softened. Just a little time to end this life with dignity," he said. "I know I've hurt you, but I don't want to leave feeling like I've ruined everything." Sarah sat down across from him. She looked into his eyes, trying to see if there was any sincerity in him. Okay, she said. "I will help you, but not because of you. I'm doing it for me." Harold looked up, surprised by her words. "What do you mean?" He asked. "I want to make sure I did everything I could, but that doesn't mean I've forgiven you," she replied. Sarah sat in her chair looking at an old photo album. Each page was filled with memories: the first house, the birth of children, trips together, moments that once seemed endlessly happy. But now these memories were tainted by betrayal. How could I not have noticed? Yeah, she asked herself aloud, feeling deep pain. She remembered their wedding vows, which Harold had broken. She had made a promise to herself to always be there for him, but was she supposed to keep it after he had destroyed their lives? Sarah couldn't sleep. She paced the room, thinking about everything that had happened. On the one hand, she was overwhelmed with pain and disappointment. Her pride and self-respect screamed that helping Harold would be a betrayal of herself. I, too, have a right to dignity, she told herself. But another voice in her heart was full of compassion. She knew Harold was not perfect, but he had been a part of her life for 50 years. If I leave him now, won't I be as heartless as he is? She wondered. The next morning, Sarah met her best friend Marta at a small cafe. She confided in her, telling her about all her doubts and pain. You have the right to say no to him, Martha said firmly, but if you feel like it would destroy you even more, then maybe you should help. Sarah thought about her friend's words. They were simple but accurate. That evening, Sarah received a call from Harold's doctor. The doctor explained that Harold needed constant support, and without it, his condition could quickly deteriorate. And I don't know if I can do that, Sarah said, her voice trembling. The choice is always yours, the doctor replied. This call was the last straw for Sarah. She felt she could no longer avoid the decision. Sarah spent the night thinking. She remembered how strong she had always been in difficult times, and while her decision might not have been perfect, she knew she had to make it for herself. The next morning, she gathered her courage and went to Harold's room. I've decided, she said, her voice firm. Harold looked up, his eyes full of hope and fear. I'm going to help you, Sarah said. Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to live with hatred. Harold nodded silently, his eyes filled with tears. Sarah decided to help Harold despite his betrayal. She convinced herself that this decision was the right one for peace of mind, but was it the right one in the long run? Every day, she brought Harold food, monitored his medication, and even stayed by his side when he was struggling. Her actions looked like a gesture of generosity, but inside her, mixed emotions were boiling. I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing this for me, she told herself every time her doubts began to erode her confidence. Her friends and family had mixed reactions to her choice. Some admired her courage and kindness. Sarah, you are a strong woman. Not everyone would be able to forgive and help you after that, said her neighbor Loretta. Others condemned her. He betrayed you? Why are you letting him control your life again? Asked Martha, her best friend. Sarah listened to both sides in silence, but she didn't know who to listen to. Every time she was alone, Sarah felt empty. Did she really make the right decision? Her thoughts went back to their happy moments and to the day she found out about the betrayal. Will it make me look weak? She asked herself. These questions haunted her, but the answers remained uncertain. Harold, feeling guilty, began to show more attention to Sarah. He thanked her every day and tried to prove that he had changed. Sarah, I'm sorry for everything I've done. Yes, you deserve so much more than I could give you, he said one evening when she helped him take his medication. But his words did not bring her any relief. She knew that sometimes an apology was not enough. One evening, Sarah sat down next to Harold. She looked him in the eyes, and her voice was more powerful than ever. I'm not helping you because you deserve it, but because I've decided not to let hatred control my life. But that doesn't mean I've forgiven you, she said. Harold remained silent, his eyes downcast. Sarah left the room, leaving Harold alone in his thoughts. She went outside, breathed in the fresh air, and looked up at the starry sky. Her face expressed peace, but deep inside she was still struggling. She knew she had done her best, but was it really the right choice? Did she have the right to help someone who had destroyed their lives, even if it gave her a sense of accomplishment? This story does not give a clear answer, but it makes you think, what would you have done in Sarah's place? Your feedback, suggestions, and subscription are always welcome.